This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints. Like, follow, and subscribe. Rate us, review us, all that fun stuff. Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and of course YouTube. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and you know what? It is week 9 of the NFL season. I can't believe I'm saying that. Week 9 of said NFL season. And you know what? I'm still joined by my guy. He hasn't gotten tired of me yet. You know, he's still here. My guy, Mr. Matt Russell, sports betting professional, creator of The Window, available on Substack and via podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm all right. Never said that I wasn't tired of you. I just feel contractually obligated to show up every week. I'm okay. Obviously, busy time of year, starting to feel it a little bit. I gave myself food poisoning yesterday, so that threw my schedule off a little bit. And as you know, at this time of year, we talked about before the podcast, like we don't have just a few hours to burn during the week. Like we just don't have that lying around. So if you're wondering, like, oh, he doesn't have a stat to back up that statement, it's because I haven't got one yet, but we'll have one by the time the articles come out on Substack later on in the week. So, thrilled to be here. Grinding my way through the season here. Was a victim of the Bears Commanders circumstance on Sunday in a pretty aggressive way. So maybe I sort of self-inflicted an illness just to kind of have art imitate life, if you will, or life imitate art. So we're okay. We're gonna live.
There's only one person to blame for that Bears outcome, and that's, fairly obvious, right? So we'll get there. We will get there.
I got a list of people, but yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned, a lot's changing between when we record the pod to when the games actually happen. And I think that is an important reminder of what exactly we do here on said podcast. That is a Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. For those who might be new to the program, I try to go through and make a pick for each and every game on the schedule, and then Matt comes in with the information and education on where the line was, where it is, and where it could be going heading into game time. And then I come out on the other end with a much more informed pick. I try to play the role of the viewer here, in which Matt can convince me to talk me out of my pick, or foolishly, I don't listen sometimes. But hey, that's the show. That's a bit. That's what we do. And we're on to week 9. We've made it this far. And as I always say, famously, for anyone who's listened to this podcast and its many iterations, I just try to win more than I lose. Again, picking every single game against the spread here. And last week, 8-8.
Take it. Take it and go.
The season record of 61, 60, and 2.
Yes. Amazing.
Here we are, right? So
could be worse.
As we move on, it could definitely be worse here. And as we move on to week 9, we put week 8 in the rear view mirror here. And we start, as always, on Thursday night with the Texans, who are on the road in New York taking on the Jets. The Jets are somehow 2-point favorites, and somehow I'm on the Jets. It's weird, but we will be here.
Wow.
Let's break this down. The Texans are a mash unit, but they keep winning games. First was Mixon was out, then he came back. Nico Collins is out. Now Diggs is out. Lots going on. They win games. Their record's pretty good. Their against the spread record might not be as good, which is what we care about a lot more, as they did not cover last week. But on the flip side, you got the Jets, who continue to stink in every way, every facet you could ever come up with against the spread, winning games, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now they're on a short week after blowing a game to the Pats, and Jacoby Brissett balling like Jacoby Brissett going down the field for a game-winning touchdown.
Right.
The Jets should be embarrassed. Now they're on a short week at home against an injured Texans team. And I just feel like everyone's talking about the New York Jets season should be over, or is over, or whatever, however you choose to define seasons being over. I say that depends on what your expectations were for this team to begin with.
Sure.
So if we look at just what this game is you got embarrassed last week in the worst way, but you have another week of trying to figure out your offense. Your coach is still trying to get under his legs, get his legs under him. Pardon me. What's the cliche I was trying to say? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're just going against a battered and bruised and injured team on a Thursday night, which is never a good place to be if you are the injured team and on the road. So for all of that, I'm talking myself into the New York Football Jets here at -2, even though I don't even understand how they're favored by 2 points. So talk to me about this line and how did we get to here and why are the Jets favored by 2 points?
Well, that's the trickiest part about this whole game, right? Is the route that we took to get to this line, because we talked about it last week, how, we were looking ahead. I think it was in the context of Houston. We're looking ahead going, all right, guess what the Thursday night line is, the look ahead line, and talking about how the Jets stink and all of that sort of thing. And like the look ahead line was like -1 Jets, right? Where you could get even money just on the money line for the Texans. And it's even worse now, right? Like it's further out. It's now Jets -2. And it's like you lost to the Patriots and now the line is moving out towards you. Like what, how did we get here? But last week we saw money come in on the Colts, and it was this very sort of strange thing. Like, wait, this team, like with this quarterback, like people were interested in betting on the Colts, driving that line from an opener down from -6 to, I think it was like closed like around -4.5. And they end up covering, but like you watch the game and you're like, yeah, Anthony Richardson, 2 of 15 in the first half and threw as many touchdowns to his team as he did the other team. And you're just like, really? Like, this is the team that you want to be backing, people? And then they go and they cover because there's a fumble late in the game and, a third down, almost touchdown. And just, it seems, frankly, kind of fluky. But fundamentally, we were trying to figure out, was that money on the Colts more about the Colts? Or it was more about kind of conceptually fading the Texans here, right? Which is a team that we have been down on relative to market all season long, because we came into the season, we talk about their rating, right? From 1 to 100. Their rating was up in the 60s. That was sort of like AFC title, like contender type thing. And we're like, I'm going to need to see a little bit more before we believe it. And now you add some injuries to the mix, right? I think the Nico Collins one is a bigger deal relative to how they are going to perform than the Stephon Diggs one. By the way, speaking of bad beats, right? Stephon Diggs sitting on 5 receptions, the over 5.5. He had 9 targets. It's the third quarter, blows out his knee, out for the season, right? So hurts bettors, hurts him, hurts the Texans. And so you look at the Texans, you're like, man, they're without 2 of their 3 wide receivers that everybody was excited about to start the season. You and I have talked about before, right? Whether it's on the pro side, you're adding a receiver like, I don't know, Davante Adams, or whether you're losing a receiver, it tends to be a little bit overrated in the marketplace, right? And so if we take last week and we go, well, the Texans won, but they didn't cover, so like they should be downgraded some, and we're still trying to figure out like what their actual real rating is. You also have the Jets here who just like find ways to lose, right? And so I just look at this and I go, all right, you can tell me all you want about Davante Adams meaning something to a point spread, but I don't believe that. And ipso facto, I have to kind of not really kill the Texans just because Stephon Diggs is out, because somebody else is going to be out there running routes, right? And they're going to have, maybe not a week necessarily, right? Short week, but they're going to have time to prepare. And the thing that I worry about for the Jets, and I say worry sort of sarcastically because, as you mentioned, right, we've been down on the Jets since before the season started, right? We thought it was Raj was going to be the guy who's going to get hurt, but they've just completely run out of excuses because they're adding pieces and it's still not necessarily helping, right? Yeah. And so I just look at this and I go, fault, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, well, it's the coach's fault. He's gone wild, and we still don't win games. Well, okay. And now it's like it's the kicker's fault. And I don't know if they've made a move yet on your boy Greg the leg, but like he's killing him too, right? But that's what bad teams do, and sometimes it's manifested in the kicker coming out there and missing a kick. I don't know why. Like scientifically, that's the case, but it just always kind of seems like when things are going bad for the Miami Dolphins, Jason Sanders comes out and misses a kick. Right? When things are going good for the Miami Dolphins, Jason Sanders makes 56-yard field goals in his sleep. It's just a weird thing how football works. And so I just look at this and I go, I don't want anything to do with the Jets. Period. End of story. Rest of the season. You know what I mean? Like it's all, I'm going to use a term that came along well after it sort of, was relevant in my life. Ick. The Jets are just ick, right? Like I just don't want anything to do with it. Now, listen, that doesn't mean I'm like, hey, Shell, like come on over on the Texans, like we got to do this. But like I do think the Texans can do things offensively because Joe Mixon is a force right now. He had one of the best touchdown runs of the season against the Colts last week. Just absolutely shedding guys. And if he was still on the Bengals, and if that version of Joe Mixon, because by the way, right, like this version wasn't necessarily the guy that the Bengals had the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But man, if that guy was on the Bengals still, that version of him, the Bengals would be better off. So I think, this is a Thursday night game, right? So we know what we're going to get. We're going to get, in theory, just kind of very vanilla game plans. And to me, the Texans are better equipped to be vanilla than the Jets are right now, because the Jets can't just hand the ball off to Breece Hall. And they actually brought Braylon Allen back in to actually do some things this past weekend. But the run game doesn't seem to be working at all. And I've heard the sort of football experts, if you will, right? The Orlovskis and some of these other guys who are really good at the X's and O's. And they talk about how the offense for the Jets, like the passing game does not connect to the run game, right? Those two things are very separate. When ideally, your 49ers are a great example, right? The passing game and the run game have to connect. They have to look similar. And that's the whole point of play action passing, et cetera, et cetera. They got token passes from Aaron Rodgers, just kind of like half fake into people. Remember when Aaron Rodgers used to put like a real hard fake on you? Like he used to really get in there for a play action pass. Now it's just token nonsense. So it looks like you're going to switch it. I mean, I guess that's a convincing enough argument, but I think the Texans can do things vanilla and have a better defense at this point and can rush the passer on Raj that they end up winning this game. It's weird to say, but I actually do trust them a little bit more.
So here's the thing. The pick has been switched to Houston Texans +2. And this is more about like, we're into week 9 right now. Right. And so it's almost like the teams are who they're showing you to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because if you're sitting there waiting around for the Jets to like, okay, now it's going to happen. Like you're going to lose a lot of bets on the way to it happening. And it might happen on Thursday or it might happen next week, right? But like on the way to like them finally breaking through and having it all click, you're going to lose a lot of bets on that on the way there. And the Jets, as we talked about, right, their rating has not changed. They are still being rated as an above average team, right? So like when are they going to play up to that? And again, maybe it's Thursday, but like why would I keep betting against or get betting on them and against the concept of them being honestly just a below average football team with a mediocre quarterback? Who's an god-awful leader, by the way.
Yeah, I also think like there's just bad vibes around that whole franchise, but also too, adding in just the Texans side of this, like you're getting points with what we'd assume is the better team or what is proven to be the better team by every metric so far. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I'm getting points. It's a short week. I understand all that. It's just a matter of like, I still think there's something fishy that goes on with some of these public teams, like the New York teams. We know there's a lot of money there, people betting on those teams and overvaluing those teams. And because Mike Greenberg has to talk about them every day, like all of these things, right? Like, there's just too much New York Jets talk that doesn't really make any sense at all. And my leaning on the Jets was more so we could talk about the line and like, hold on a second here. How did we get here?
Yeah.
Right?
Like and that's what I mean. From last week to this week, the only thing that's changed is Stephon Diggs got hurt, right? Yeah. And it's like, those 6 catches are going to go to other guys, right? Dalton Schultz is going to be more involved in this game. Doesn't even have to be a wide receiver, right? John Mechie is going to be more involved in this game, right? Hutchinson's going to be more involved in this game. You can move those 6 catches around to 3 other guys and still make it work, right? But fundamentally, like, are you prepared for this game, right? And I think the Texans at least have the ability to be prepared on a short week for a road game. And the idea that this has moved from essentially around pick'em to 2 because Stephon Diggs was hurt, like, and we're completely ignoring that the Jets just lost to the Patriots. Like that's the problem I have here, right? The Texans can come down from a rating perspective without Stephon Diggs. I don't have a problem with that, but like, why are we sticking the Jets still in the same place at like 55 out of 100? That like, what have they done to earn that, right? They should be down underneath. They should be down where the Cowboys are, quite frankly. I would pay money right now for a Cowboys Jets game on Thursday night. Like, how do we switch that out? Like, just put that directly in my veins. Like, let's do that. Like,
We
who do
we
we have
will
to
get to the
call?
Cowboys momentarily for sure, but there's a big boy game that I want to get to here as I just emphasize the point that yes, the pick is switched. Houston Texans +2, but there's a big boy game on Sunday. The Lions, 3-point favorites on the road in Green Bay against the Packers. The Lions just seem to be rolling. There was no let up last week, although it happened in a weird way in
Yeah.
which there was just all the special teams was just going like they were very special for the Lions last week, and they blew out the Titans in the process. 3-point faves in a huge NFC North showdown. I'm kind of going back to the well here because the Lions were road favorites against like in Minnesota, and now they're road favorites in Green Bay. And I know like statistically, I probably should be on the Packers here, but I'm just rolling. I'm going to be frank here. I'm just rolling with the Lions here, who just seem to be a wagon right now. They just seem to be possessed right now. They are rolling right now. And I can't lie. They're just a fun team to bet on. Right? Like you, and
right.
I know that's
the fun
not
is in the
sound
winning.
betting advice, but if there's one thing I try to be on this pod, it's honest. Right?
Yeah.
I'm on the Lions -3.
That's fair. You're gonna have to start paying for that though, because we are up to sort of that in between 3 and 3.5 zone right now, right? Where it's like you can give 3.5, and you can do so at even money, or you can give the -3 here, but you're gonna have to pay -125, something along those lines, right? So we're veering, and honestly, and the reason we're veering is because of the quarterback situation for the Packers, right? And Jordan Love hurts his groin. He tries to gut through it, but it's like, man, like you don't need to be out there, doing this. This is not worth like tearing the thing off the bone and having you being out for the rest of the season. And so the problem here, so let's kind of go back, right? Like, what would the line be with Jordan Love healthy, totally fine, like if they had played this game last week? Because we got to the point where the Packers were rated up in that echelon, along with the Vikings, where they have moved up into that NFC Conference Championship type echelon, that early to mid 60s rating that we talked about, where, some of these other teams, like the Texans started with, right? And it makes sense because the Packers just beat the Texans and all that stuff. So with that being said, like the line for this game would be, just doing some quick math here, beep, boop, boop, Detroit, Green Bay, because that's a 4:00 game. It'd be basically Green Bay -1, right? Yep. Obviously, the home field advantage being in the mix there, and these teams being pretty similarly rated. Still, the Lions would be rated higher than. So when Malik Willis has had to take over for Jordan Love, we saw earlier on in the season that rating got absolutely obliterated. Now, it was never as high as in the mid 60s, right? They went from the mid 50s down into like the mid 30s, and there was value on backing the Packers in those two games, and they ended up winning those games outright and covering both times. So now Malik Willis, based on this line, it appears like Malik Willis is going to be back in the mix here for the 49ers. And so where does the Packers rating go?
For the Packers.
Yes, sorry. So where does the rating go for the Packers with Malik Willis in? Well, it's not going to go back down to like 37 because they were good enough in those games. So it's actually around 47. So they're being considered kind of this like, a little bit below average team. Honestly, frankly, probably where the Jets should be. They're about the Jets at this point.
Yeah.
So as this sort of starts to tick down further, it's going to obviously move one way or another when we find out for sure whether Jordan Love can or cannot play. Because with this groin injury, it is going to be rubbed. It is going to be massaged. It is going, I don't know if you're throwing those electrical things down there. I don't know if that's, what you want to be doing, but like, they're going, it's the NFL, man. They're going to do everything that they possibly can to get this guy to play, because this isn't the Jags. This isn't, a non-conference, meaningless game. It's actually a really important game for the Packers, which we had talked about a couple of weeks ago, right? And because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was because they literally go into their bye in the next week. And so it's the type of thing that they're going to have to judge. Can we get through this game with Jordan Love not getting, more hurt so that he then gets the 2 weeks off? Or do we just kind of not tank the game? Because I think Malik Willis has actually been really capable to run this sort of Malik Willis playbook that the Packers have, right? Where they literally have just dusted this thing off, where it's like, all right, we got the Jordan Love book. Oh, he's hurt. Okay, well, it's a smaller book. It's a shorter book. It involves a lot more running, but it's still a book that we have with Malik Willis. I will say from a Lions perspective, knowing that we don't know who the quarterback is necessarily going to be here, I would prefer to wait to see, obviously, who's going to start at quarterback. It's going to be a lot like the Washington and Chicago game last week. Now, if you remember last week, it was, all right, I would like Washington +3 with Marcus Mariota. I would like the Bears plus anything if it's Jaden Daniels. And I actually got both at one point.
Yeah.
Which made that Hail Mary that much more painful because I was sitting on a fat, juicy middle that was going to be the biggest payout of the season thus far.
Yeah.
And went awry because, well, everybody saw it and will continue to see it for the rest of time, which is super sweet when you lose a bet like that. So my point is like, yeah, if Jordan Love plays, I would be interested in the Lions because I think the line is going to go back towards Pick'em.
I'm with you.
But if, as he sort of, because it's going to be this thing where it's like it gets slowly getting better throughout the week, it's loosening up or it's starting to feel better. We're going to it's going to keep moving one way or another, right? This line is literally attached to Jordan Love's groin.
Yeah.
Right? Like to put it in a way, right? So the better his groin gets, the better the line is going to be for the Packers or to bet the Lions. And the worse that it gets, like if Malik Willis was announced out today, like now that we've blown through 3, right? -3, it could get up into the 4.5 range, right? I don't think it's done moving because of the possibility that Jordan Love could still play, and they don't want to go too far. Now, having this scene, you've got it down as 3 as this is starting to tick up through 3 to 3.5. To me, that's an indication that it's less likely that Jordan Love is going to play. But again, we saw this last week with Jaden Daniels, where if you read the tea leaves and you saw the line being Washington +3, you'd say, oh, that's a Marcus Mariota line. Doesn't look good for Jaden Daniels. And then he just plays, and then he just throws a 65-yard Hail Mary, right? So it's like it's a wait-and-see approach here, but you just need to understand where the line is, as you said, and where it could be going. And I think this could get a little longer for the Lions if Malik Willis is playing. But if you're going to give me 4 points with Malik Willis and the Packers, I'm probably going to take that because that Lions game last week, it's funny. We see some upsets in the NFL, right? And then you look at even the Patriots upset. And you're like, you look at the box score and you're just like, how did the Patriots win that game? And it's like, well, because football's football. It's super fun. It's super weird and things happen. And upsets happen because of those sort of box score anomalies, right? Raiders Chiefs last year. Well, the Lions were the beneficiary of the box score anomaly last week. And when the better team gets the benefit of the box score anomaly, it leads to them winning by 1 billion points, right? It's like, well, they are the better team and they got the luck element to it, right? With special teams touchdowns and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, they probably are going to win by a ton. What happens when they aren't necessarily so lucky on the road against a better team that's well coached? I think we're in for a tight game here, regardless of who plays at quarterback.
Yeah, no, totally with you there. Totally understand everything you just said. As I stated,
they might be your new Chiefs.
Lions. I'm rolling with the.
They might be your new Chiefs.
That far,
and they're very similar.
We'll get to the Chiefs later for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm rolling with the Lions here. They're just a wagon right now, and they're figuring out ways to just get the job done. And yeah, I enjoy betting on them. So we'll see how that goes. As I talk myself into Jared Goff not being Jared Goff anymore, right? Just blindly betting the Lions as if Jared Goff isn't Jared Goff. But
one of very few, by the way, real interjection before we go, very few outdoor road games for Jared Goff this year, right? Remember we talked before the season started, where it was like, oh yeah, the Lions never leave the indoors. Right, obviously, all of their home games, much of their quick. Tell me a Jared Goff outdoor game from this season.
Interesting,
right? And it's
okay,
yeah. And so it's like, well, if they're just never going to play outdoors, then we're going to forget that he's maybe not that great outdoors. We might be reminded that he's not that great outdoors this week.
Interesting note there. How dare you end on that note? But we will continue. We will continue. Cowboys at the Falcons. Falcons is 3-point favorites. And this is where I'm going to hold for a second because I'm going to say from here on out, there are a lot of spreads this week where I'm like, there's some teams that are just favored by too much. And I feel like I'm on a lot of underdogs here. So I'm like, this is where I need the reminders of the market and where these teams are being ranked right now. What their values are, because there's a lot of lines here. And this is one of them where it's like, I get it, but the Falcons laying 3 points. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks. They win close games. They tried very hard to blow that spread last week to Tampa, and Tampa just couldn't backdoor cover. Like, it was right there for them. Atlanta did everything they could to let them have it. They just couldn't finish the job. But this one here, 3 points at home, and the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, they might really, really stink. They can't run the ball. They have to rely way too much on Dak. I don't even really blame Dak as much as some people do, because it's like, what do you expect him to do? He has to go out there and try to be a gunslinger, and that's not his fault. That's just how the team is set up. Like, they're running literally Zeke and Dalvin Cook. It's 2024.
Right? Dalvin Cook. What an electric backfield if this is 2016, though. Right?
Absolutely insane. So their defense is beat up. You got their quarterbacks arguing with media people after the games. Like, it's just tough times right now for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Yeah. But at some point, you know, we're just asking Dallas to show up here, Dallas to understand just what's at stake here. And the Falcons, I mean, they might already have their division in hand right now. I don't know. I'm talking myself into the points here because I don't like laying 3 with the Falcons. That's why I'm on Dallas +3 here.
As somebody who took the Falcons before the season as the favorite in this division to win the division, which is just conceptually seemed like kind of an uncomfortable thing, but I did it anyway. Like, I hope they have the division wrapped up at this point. But yeah, obviously 2 wins over the Bucs is a significant advantage in the NFC South, and the Saints have gone south, and the Panthers just live in the South, literally and figuratively. All right, so I got to check you on this. I got to check you here. I'm seeing 2.5s across the board here.
Okay.
So I don't know if that changes anything. And while you look around to see if maybe there's a 2.5 at a reputable, or a 3, I should say, at a reputable.
I see the 2.5. No, I see the 2.5.
Okay.
Live updates here. This is what we do.
Yeah. So I can see why you look at the Falcons and you'd be like, okay, like, I've said it a million times, right? The Falcons, who love to win by 1 point and who were trying to give that game away as much as they possibly could towards the end of that game against the Buccaneers last week. I can understand, like, the idea of, like, laying any points with the Falcons. I just think the Falcons are, like, good. They're just kind of getting good, right? Like, what are the things that we've hated about the Falcons, right? It's Kyle Pitts is not involved. Now, all of a sudden, Kyle Pitts is in the mix. And Sheld's already switched, so like I don't even have to say anything else.
I'm trying to point.
I know. No, I know you've switched. I gotta make sure everybody else is switching too. No, and he said, okay, well, the Cowboys just have to show up. It's like, no, like, they actually don't. Like, they have to do more than just show up, and they have to play for 60 minutes. And honestly, like, I liked the Cowboys last week because I was like, all right, this is it. Like, you got blown out by the 49ers last year. You've gotten blown out so many times this year. Like, you had the bye week. Everything should be absolutely, like, buttoned up, and, like, this should be your absolute best game that you could possibly have. And then all we see is 3rd and 5, hands off to, like, Hunter Lubke or whatever this guy's name is, right? And you're like, that's what you came up with? Like, when the Lions have time on their hands, and that's why I reference them as the new Chiefs, when they have time on their hands, they come up with David Montgomery throwing touchdown passes and hooking laterals to the offensive line. Like, they're so good that they just, like, have extra time at practice. The Cowboys apparently just do not have enough time. Because you mentioned, like, Dak having to be a gunslinger because of the run game. Well, okay, first and foremost, the run game's not going to change, so Dak as gunslinger is still going to exist. And then we just watch him make, honestly, the dumbest throws, the most unnecessary throws. Like, there was the worst throw that I hated was, like, in that last drive, he just threw the ball away but there was a 49er standing right by the sideline, and he almost just threw the ball away directly to that 49er that was standing on the sideline. It was like, you can't even throw the ball away. Like, I honestly want this man's eyes and or brain checked at this point, because like stuff is just not processing the same way that it has before. And it's just like, if you're going to throw 2 interceptions per game, and now you're going to go to Atlanta where you've got Jesse Bates back there looking to pick off anything, just an absolute turnover creating machine. And some of the obviously really good corners, really good secondary, like the whole, like, let's just throw it to CD Lamb and like that should be good enough for our offense. That's not going to work, man. And like you mentioned, obviously the running backs, like that's not going to work. And so I just look at this and I'm like, the Falcons right now are, and you can see why they would sort of slowly get better, right? Because the quarterback is getting more comfortable. He's night and day from where he was in those first 2 games of the season. And you just look at it and you go like, okay, well, we started with the Vikings going slowly up and finding their rating to the point where they're like rated as like a top 5 team in the league. And I don't know if that's true or if that's deserved or whatever, but like the Falcons maybe took 2 or 3 weeks, but like they should also see that rating bump, right? Slowly go up. And they're not. They're just sitting there at 51 out of 100 because the market just doesn't want to admit that the Falcons might be pretty good. Because, yeah, I mean, listen, they've got flaws. Everybody's got flaws. Meanwhile, like we keep giving the Cowboys the benefit of the doubt. Like they're going to turn it around. They're going to turn it around. But you look at it and you go like, who? It's Dak, who gets a ton of money, but can't not throw 2 interceptions. Like that's a bad deal. And CD Lamb. And like that is it. Especially if Micah Parsons still doesn't play. And honestly, if he does play, like I think the Falcons, can handle him just fine. And so I just look at this and I go, we're getting under a touchdown. And we're being told that the Falcons and the Cowboys are essentially the same, right? Like that's essentially what this -2.5 means.
Yep.
What? Like how? And like now is going to be the week where the Cowboys like play a good game. Where was that last week? They can't play 60 minutes. They're not a 4-quarter football team. They'll play some 4th quarter once they're down 20 points. They might even play some 1st quarter, right? From an effort perspective. They're not playing 4 full quarters.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, okay, maybe like they, the Falcons get up 9 and they come and they backdoor cover. Like, I'll be so disappointed. Like, I don't want to sound like an old father here, but like, I'm gonna be so disappointed if the Falcons don't win this game, because it's honestly like, should be a big game for the Falcons, right? It's the Cowboys coming to town, and you're on this, as you like to say, right, this like wave of playing better. It's like, this is what we're talking about here. This is a game that you need to win, and not by 1 or 2 points. It's a game where you need to convincingly beat a Cowboys team that is just a wreck and didn't do anything during the bye week to make it seem like they're less of a wreck.
Yeah. And I mean, again, as soon as the line notification of the line movement, that means the pick movement as well. And a reminder to the folks listening at home that sometimes for me, it's as simple. You heard everything Matt said, and all of that is true. And if you listen to what I was saying about the Cowboys earlier, I mean, it's just a reminder of 3 versus 2.5, right? Like, I know it doesn't sound like it should make sense.
Right.
Like, so there might be someone listening being like, really? Like, what's the difference? But there's a huge difference between I just need to win by field goal.
Yeah.
Right. And
Cowboys by 10 or Falcons by 10, Cowboys driving. Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's a very, very reasonable, outcome for like the last 3 minutes of this game. And if you're sitting there with +3, if you're sitting there with +3, like you're probably feeling like you've got a chance to at least get out of Dodge here with a push. Mm-hmm. And you think, well, you also go in thinking that the Cowboys might win the game and all that sort of thing. But if it's, 10-point lead, Cowboys driving, -2.5, right? That's the percentage difference. And if it's a 5, 6, 7% difference, that's the difference between winning and losing. That's the difference between being profitable and not profitable over a long period of time.
Correct. Those are the margins, friends. Those are the margins indeed. We move on to the Bears, who I'm pretty sure you're still mad at, as they travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. I'm kind of confused here because backing the Cardinals for 3 straight weeks, I don't know if that's a world that I can like live in real life. The Cardinals are in the mix in the NFC West because everybody's in the mix in the NFC West.
Yeah.
And, the Bears struggled last week. Caleb struggled last week until he didn't at the end of the game. And of course, they thought they won. But as you mentioned, the Hail Mary, and I'm surprised dude is still on that team. But
right,
we're here. And I think I'm just going to move aside here. I'm on the Bears +1 here. But I'm going to move aside here. And I'm going to clear out. And the jokes that Kobe and LeBron made, there's a video of them playing on the Olympic team and LeBron laughing at Kobe saying, "Oh, when you just throw up the 4, like we didn't know what that was, that would just ISO, get out of the way."
Yeah.
You're throwing up the ISO right now, and I'm just getting out of your way.
Yeah.
Run the play. Tell me what's going on with the Bears and how that went down for you, right?
Yeah. No, listen, it was one thing. I sat there and I watched, and like I said, I had Washington +3 early on in the week, and then when Jaden Daniels came in, I shouldn't say came in, but was like ruled that he could play on Sunday, the line shifted and the Bears were essentially even money on the money line. So I came over the top on the Bears because I wanted the Bears. If all things are equal, I wanted the Bears in that game. And you can say, listen, man, it was 12-0. Like the Bears are getting, dominated pretty significantly by the Commanders because the Commanders are a really good team, et cetera, right? But you can see there was a path to victory. It's like, okay, we still got plenty of time for 2 touchdown drives. And we know, when a team, it's amazing football, right? Where you've got a lead, then the other team gets to a point where they have to play 4-down football. And it's like, it sucks for them because there's obviously like, oh man, like we're in so much in trouble that we have to play all 4 downs. But when you're the defense or you're betting on the team that is defending, the team who knows that they have 4 downs to play with, like it's terrifying because you're like, man, 4 down, getting 10 yards on 4 downs is really actually pretty easy if you're actually planning to have 4 downs. And so I'm sitting there kind of confident that the Bears are going to be able to come back, and they get their first touchdown. And now you're like, all right, well, now we got plenty of time here to get a couple of drives here. And then they get the drive and they get it down to the 1-yard line. And these coaches, and I know we harp on the same thing, right? And it's like, field goal kickers or referees, but like fundamentally this whole league comes down to coaches and coordinators, right? There's like 12 players that actually matter. It's who's putting these guys in position to succeed. And these coaches, and the handing the ball off to a backup offensive lineman. Like it's, William Refrigerator Perry in the Super Bowl in 1985. And you're just like, what about this makes you think that this is an appropriate time to use that play? Why do you think you're the Chiefs or the Lions where you can just F around in practice and do the fun plays? Like, you are down 5 points. This touchdown has to go into the end zone. And so they run like the dumbest play imaginable. And it wasn't like, oh, we tried with our running back and he just didn't get in. It's like they were wildly excited to hand this ball off to this lumbering guard as if it was ever going to be successful. They get the ball back even after the fumble. And they get down to the 1-yard line. And like, yes, they end up scoring, but like they threw a fade to DJ Moore first, right? It's like, why are you trying so hard to F this up? Like, what is the purpose of all of this, right? Like, just hand it off to Roschon Johnson and let's move on with our lives. And they finally do, and they finally score. And you're just like, guys, we could have just done that before and not had to deal with all the BS. And I'm sitting there and I don't want to be greedy, man. I don't. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, you know what? Like, I would love it if they did not make this 2-point conversion and they just won by 1 point, and I would get all the money. All of the money would come to your boy. And I'm like, no, you know what? Just be fine with a push on Washington +3 and take the Bears money line money. Like, that's still a really nice, windfall. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows what happens next, Shell. Right. And even then I'm going, well, like they might just tie the game, worst case scenario, they get 30 yards and they get a field goal and they make the field goal and we go to overtime and whatever. And then, they give up the 10 yards where it's like, how about you give us just enough yardage so that our quarterback, with mangled ribs, by the way, can throw this ball just far enough, not even in the end zone, right? Like the ball is going to land on the 1-yard line. And they give them for free this, right? There was no timeouts. There's not, you're just giving them 10 yards for no reason. The coaching staffs on these teams, offensive, defensive, idiots. And it's not just the Bears, man. It's not just the Bears. It's all of them. They're all just absolute fools. We watched on Thursday Night Football. My guy. Not that I'm a Vikings fan, but I'm a Coach of the Year Kevin O'Connell fan. And all that dude needed to do was kneel the ball at the end of the first half. But they just had to run a handoff play. And the gods of football, of betting, of injuries, I don't know what the gods are doing. I don't know who they are, what they are, the name of them, whatever. But they're going to mess with you if you mess with them. And they break the leg of Christian Darrisaw, the Vikings, top offensive lineman, left tackle. And it's like, all you had to do is kneel it out, man. And you didn't, and they effed you. So, like, of course, I think that failed handoff to the offensive lineman was a karmic injustice that was repaid in the form of that Hail Mary. Call me crazy, right? I think those two things are attached. When you F around, you will find out. It's the same thing with talking about your bets before they've won, or trying to be greedy, or this, that, or whatever, right? Like, you got to stay on the good side of whatever cosmic deal is happening around here. All that to say, I like the Bears this week. I know.
I'm with you. I'm here. I've already stated I'm here.
Because you can't have all of that pent-up anger, resentment, issues, etc., and let that affect your judgment the following week. The Cardinals had a nice 2-game run there. I don't think they were deserved to beat the Chargers, right? The Chargers kicked that game away on Monday Night Football with fumbles, multiple. And I'm not saying we were lucky. Like, listen, we were on the Cardinals last week. We were on the Cardinals to beat the Dolphins. I think that has more to do with the fact that the Dolphins are probably just as capable as the Bears and all of these other teams of bad coaching, bad play, et cetera, et cetera. Now you've got this Bears team that's going to Arizona. And if there's anything that Chicagoans like to do, it's go to Arizona. This place is going to be packed with Chicago Bears fans. Packed. Like, this is not a home field advantage for the Cardinals, right? And so just that alone, again, we're talking about a money line here and a point spread of like 1 point, right? But like, just take out the home field advantage in this game. And that, of course, flips the line even further towards Chicago, which I already think, by the way, because of Chicago's effery last week, is probably a little bit undervalued, and the Cardinals are maybe a little bit overvalued for the wins that they've gotten in this last couple of weeks. And so I think the Bears are going to get a little healthier here, right? We're going to get Jaquan Brisker back. It seems like Kyler Gordon is, I think, supposed to return there. That's 2 guys in the secondary. I mean, there's not enough guys to come back to get Tyreek Stevenson out of my life. Like, speaking of, like, F around and find out, like, Tyreek Stevenson was unserious on that play. And, like, it cost him. And you can say, like, oh, he got back in the play, but, like, he lost his mind. He wasn't boxing out the guy, off the back there, Noah Brown. Because he effed around and he found out, like, you got to stay. P's and Q's here, man. I's dotted and T's crossed. And the Bears didn't do that, but I don't know from 1 week to the next which team is going to bleep it up in the way that these teams bleep it up. And the Cardinals could absolutely bleep it up. And I don't think they're the better team. And I don't think they have any real home field advantage in this game. And so we're getting a plus money price here with the Bears. And, like, yeah, I got to figure that they learned some lessons in that game. A game that, by the way, like, they were going to win on the road against a team that is far better than this Arizona Cardinals team.
Correct. All of the above. Correct. Let's go with the Bears and keep it moving here to, an interesting game. Dolphins on the road in Buffalo. Buffalo laying 6 points. The Bills rolled on a pretty solid win last week against a beat-up Seattle team, but they did their job. The Bills, they played who was in front of them. They took care of business. They dominated. But now you're heading back home. It's a rematch of, obviously, the game earlier this season in which the Bills were running all over the Dolphins, and then Tua got hurt, and now Tua is back. And the 6 points here, this falls into the trend. I'm going to keep repeating it this pod. There's a lot of teams that the spread just seem a little high to me, and I need to be talked into taking Buffalo here, because I know that, like, this spread always seems to be closer to 3. And then I'm like, okay, Buffalo, I'm in on that. You know what I mean? Because I know they just beat the Dolphins. But at 6, I'm like, are we getting a little too high here? You know, they brought Tua back a week early so that he could get ready for this big Buffalo game. If they still have some faint dreams of thinking their seasons, you know, they have a chance in the division.
Yeah.
But I need to be talked into taking Buffalo here because I'm on Miami +6.
Listen, man, the story has not changed since week 2. It's a bad matchup for the Dolphins. It always has been. The Bills are going to absolutely hammer the Dolphins this week because that's what they do to the Dolphins. That's what they did to the Dolphins when the Dolphins were good. And the Dolphins are not good. Like, I'm glad Tua is back. I'm glad he's healthy. I'm glad he's out there slinging it. We saw it last week. The rest of the Dolphins team is not very good. The offensive line is not good enough, right, to break large runs the way that they need to, even though they had a decent, you know, Devon Achane had a really nice game in that game last week. The Bills defense is built almost entirely to stop a Dolphins team. The problem for the Bills is that it's not built to stop like the Ravens, right? Like you have to pick a lane. Not every team can be so versatile that they're like, oh yes, we have large players and they're super fast. Like you have to pick one or the other. And the Bills have picked one that they know that they have to play every season, right? Twice. They don't necessarily have to play the Ravens every season. Like it's probably or maybe going to be on their path to the Super Bowl, but like it's not necessarily a guarantee that they play them either in the playoffs or the regular season. They know they're going to play the Dolphins every year. And they've got the playbook, they've got the personnel figured out. And so you're looking at this and you're going like, man, this is so high. Like you're right. Like, yeah, it's usually 3.5, maybe, et cetera, right? We watched them walk right into Miami, and before Tua got hurt, they were pounding Miami in that game. And like Josh Allen didn't really have to do all that much. James Cook was able to like vibe his face off in that game. I just look at this and I go like you're being coaxed in to the Dolphins here because it's like, oh, but Dolphins Bills, like this is a showdown. I'm here to tell you, like, I don't think this is a showdown. I think this is Bills put up 45 points against this Dolphins team. And like if the Dolphins keep up with that, cool. But like I just don't see it. This is not this game. This will be I'll save you the energy next time. Whether it's next year or whether the Dolphins somehow make like a wild card and play the Bills, the answer is the Bills, right? Like week 2, 2025, week 14, 2026, Bills. Unless like something wildly different changes. But I just don't see that. I don't see that happening. The Dolphins have been beaten up because of defensive departures and defensive injuries, and they cannot run with the Bills here who are cooking.
Nope. Right there with you. Totally get it. As I said, this is a theme for the week. There's a lot of lines here that I'm just going to be like, I know I should be here, but this line seems a little high. So that was perfect right there. Buffalo -6. Pick has been switched. We're moving on here to the Chargers, who are in Cleveland, taking on the Browns, who are favored because they have
none. Beep, beep, beep. No, Chargers -2. Chargers
-2. Okay, I swear this is a thing where did I just mess this up? I mean, I'm sure I've just messed this
up. That's what's been 2 all week, so I will throw you.
So I definitely messed that up.
Yes.
Nope, that's fine.
The other ones have been moving, and like we got to stay as up to date as possibly can on a Wednesday morning.
I definitely messed this up. Do you know how I know I messed this up? Because
you can't believe that the Chargers would be favored on the road against a decent team, because that's where
no. Because no. I messed this up because I'm on the Browns, but I know what I wrote down versus what is on the screen here. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you understand? Picking up what I'm putting down here. So the Chargers favored by 1.5, but I'm on the Browns at plus the 1.5. If that makes sense.
If we're switching things around, there's 2. 2 is widely available. +2.
I mean, sounds even better to me.
Right?
Cool. Here.
Tell me more. Do I hear 2.5? Do I hear 3? I don't think we'll be hearing 3.
You know who I'm going to give all the credit to for this? My man's Jameis. Because Jameis is out here.
Right.
And I mean, we've talked about this from the beginning of the season, how, let Jameis rock, because Deshaun Watson definitely is not it. And if there's anything to emphasize that more, it was watching Jameis Winston last week, and he was the full Jameis Winston experience, summed up as best as possible by not only his pregame speeches and postgame speeches, but also the way that game ended, in which he threw the game away with the pick, if not for Kyle Hamilton dropping the ball. That was right to him. And then what? The next play or a couple plays later,
literally the next play, I think it was.
Airs it out for the game-winning touchdown. Absolutely insane. Want to shout out, I think it was Orlovsky I was watching, talking about how they just went on like 4 straight all-out blitzes. That was the Ravens, like 4 straight. And it's like, I think they're going to figure it out what's going on at some point. Either way, Jameis doing his thing. I'm rolling here with Jameis. And listen, my key's still wrong here. I gotta go back to the control room here. But the point is that no matter what it says, I'm on the Browns. I'm on the Browns here. Whatever the points are being given or taken at under 3 points, I'm on the Browns. Reason being because they can just move the ball. They can put up points. Jameis might throw some picks, but they're going to keep throwing. They're going to keep the offense moving. They're going to put points on the board. And the Chargers, I think, are still an offense that moves, but I don't think they can do the dirt against the Browns defense.
Yeah, and the Chargers' run offense has sort of slowed here. It's come at the same time as Herbert being allowed to throw it a little bit more. But again, you have to think about some of the defenses that certainly in the last couple of weeks that they've played, right? The Cardinals defense, not particularly good, but like, you know, we saw Kyler Murray after that game saying like, well, we tried really hard in practice this week. I mean, that's a paraphrase, but like, you know, and it's like, okay, so that was kind of the best the Cardinals were going to give. Another reason why, you know, we might like the Bears against the Cardinals in that game. And then, you know, you had the Saints last week, which, you know, they got a lot healthier. The Saints did. And that game was eminently winnable. Like if you watch that game, if you just look at the score, because listen, it was maybe the 4th most interesting game to casual fans. If you looked at that score, you'd be like, man, the Chargers like killed the Saints and like, you know, they deserve to be sort of rated that they are the way they are and sort of where they are in the standings and all that sort of thing. Again, like it's eye test, but I'm watching that game going like anything out of the Saints here offensively and like they can win this game. And like it's Spencer Rattler's 3rd game and he's had a week and a half to prepare. And you're just like, no, this is not it, right? And you know what it looks like.
We told you this weeks ago, by the way.
Right. But it's like, you know, you still kind of go like, well, I'm going to give a guy a chance to improve. I'm going to give a guy a chance here. And I'm going to say a phrase that I don't even really believe myself, but like, I'm going to trust a coaching staff in the NFL. I never actually do. But like in theory, right? It's like, okay, well, like, let's get this guy prepared, right? In theory, right? But when you're sitting there and you're watching it and you're like, you know what? The issue here, I'll put it this way, like a lot of people will be like, oh, the quarterback is the problem, right? And if you can get to a point where you discern where the quarterback is not the problem, I think that's really an advanced high-level way of thinking about football. But there are also times where you're watching the game and you're going, the quarterback is the problem here, right? Like this is the case. And I'll use a college example, right? Like Texas A&M last week. You're watching that game against LSU and you're just like, are they just going to die on the vine here with this guy? And then they bring in Marcel Reed, the backup quarterback, and he's out there just energy and like running around. You're like, and they win the game handily. And you're just like, they made the right change at the right time. And the Saints make the change to Jake Haener. And like, I don't know if it was a little bit late and it was too, you know, they weren't going to be able to make a comeback even with him. But like, he looked a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So my point is like the Chargers, I'm not there with them yet. And I think it's easy to see, like, you know, look at the scoreboard and be like, well, like this is a really good team. And like, they need to be, you know, they need to be rated to the point where they're a road favorite. I'm not there with that. And I'm also not there with, or I'll put it a little bit differently. The Browns, I have a rating for the Browns where I think the Browns should be, where they were before the season started, where they are with anybody as the quarterback other than Deshaun Watson. That could be Joe Flacco. That could be Jameis Winston. They were they got down to 7.5 point underdogs. They started 10-point underdogs in that, you know, that early on in the week last week against the Ravens, right? But you could see people being like, oh no, like it was a very organic, natural thing where it was like, okay, well, Jameis is going to be the quarterback. The offense is going to be better. The rating has to go up. The point spread has to tighten. At 7.5, like, yeah, he could have thrown that interception, but it was going to take a lot more for the Ravens to cover that game. They were never in doubt as far as covering the game. They're never going to cover that game, right? And so the rating has to move up for the Browns. And so you go, okay, how much does the rating have to move up for the Browns? And they've moved the Browns rating up only a bit because, again, they are the home underdogs against the Chargers in this game. But if you look at that game, and if you forget everything else you know about the Ravens and everything else you know about the Browns from this season, and you watch that Ravens-Browns game, you would think that you were watching a game from last season, from the year before, right? Where it was two potential playoff teams playing a tough game. Yes, the Ravens are better, but not that much better, et cetera, et cetera. So I personally am going to just take the Browns, and I'm going to stick them at 50 out of 100. A dead average team with Jameis Winston. Could the range be really high and really low, depending on whether Jameis is throwing interceptions or throwing touchdown passes? Absolutely. But I think the Browns also take a hit in the rating conversation because they traded Amari Cooper. And the idea that, like, well, they're giving up on the season, Amari Cooper's out, et cetera, et cetera. But what if you happen to have I believe he's second-year wide receiver that you really like? And that gentleman by the name of Cedric Tillman, who used to play at Tennessee. Yeah. And if that guy can do the same stuff that Amari Cooper does, which over the last two games is 70-plus receiving yards and 2 touchdowns last week, then you're not suffering, right? It's the Stephon Diggs thing, right? If somebody comes up this Thursday and gets, or if they spread around 6 catches, or one guy gets 6 catches, if John Mechie catches 5 balls this Thursday, then all of a sudden you don't need to downgrade a team because they lost a big-name wide receiver. So if I just take the Browns and I just stick them at 50, right? Which again is basically where they were before the season, because their a season win total was 8.5, which is dead 500, right? 8.5 and 8.5, theoretically, of course. Well, what does the line come out to? Comes out to the Browns being a slight favorite in this game, like a -1. And doesn't it feel like Browns -1 is, again, if we just forget all of the Deshaun Watson era at this point, doesn't Browns -1 sort of feel like a more sensible number for this game?
Totally.
Yeah, right. And so and it's not a crazy value because we're not crossing key numbers here, but we're getting plus money on the money line for the Browns. That's kind of nice, right? So again, I think there's a couple points of value here on the Browns. Again, we don't know what to expect from Jameis. The range conversation on him, if you beat the Ravens, you probably deserve to be considered well above average. But if you're capable of throwing 4 interceptions at any given night, then your rating on the bottom side could be a little bit dicey too. So I'm just sticking them at 50 for the foreseeable future here, and which probably means there's going to be a few Browns bets, not just this week, but a couple more going forward. Though I don't think they play next week. So hopefully we get a win here from the Browns. Hopefully the market forgets about Cleveland being at least decent.
Yeah, the bye weeks are all over the place. Only 2 teams on buys this week.
No buys last week, 2 this week. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, very strange. We move on to the Rams, who are I should emphasize the pick there, just for those keeping score at home here. Cleveland +2 is the pick for people watching, listening, all that fun stuff. Control room, get your stuff in order, okay? Let's get
they're in shambles right now.
Track. Rams on the road, 2-point favorites in Seattle against the Seahawks. To me, this is just 2 teams heading in different directions, as the Rams are now, from last Thursday, they're going to play, get a little extra time here. Koopa. Wow, I combined the 2.
Koopa Cup. Koopa Nakapa.
Right?
It's not a terrible combined name. Koopa Nakapa, I'm kind of into it.
Puka and Cooper Kupp were both back last week, and that offense was just rolling. Matthew Stafford was feeling himself last week. And, the Seahawks, I think, are a little banged up here. I don't know. I haven't checked the status of DK Metcalf, but clearly we're seeing how important he might be to their squad. This is a tough one here. And I know the Seahawks and this division is just really tough right now, but I just like where the Rams are moving as opposed to where the Seahawks are moving. So I'll lay the points on the road with the Rams, and Matthew Stafford looking good with his weapons. And shout out to Williams, who's just running like crazy this year.
Yeah.
Having a good season.
All right. First question. If Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua played Mario Kart, what character would they select? Secondly, this game comes down for me. I can't make a bet on this game until I know what the deal is with DK Metcalf. Right? Nice. Because we talked about that game last week, and contextually, I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised that the Bills might be 3-point favorites on the road against Seattle. And textbook wise, right? Chapter 1 wise, like it felt like Seattle +3, like it was a bet that sort of needed to be made. But the problem is the Seahawks' entire offense, based on their personnel, is based on the idea that DK Metcalf can, as they say, take the top off the defense, right? And we know that DK likes to take his top off, but to take the top off the defense means that like Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba can work the underneath, right? We've seen Noah Fant be really successful in these last few weeks, and Geno Smith can find DK Metcalf and at least try to stretch the ball down the field. And oftentimes that's worked, right? DK has had more long touchdowns this season than I think he has ever before. But then he goes out in that game, and now it's all of a sudden who's going to go deep, and who are you going to fear going deep? Because it's not Tyler Lockett, it's not JSN, it's not Fant, like it's Jake Bobo, like I don't think so. Is Jake Bobo, is that a Mario Kart character? Sounds like it. Could be, right? I'm going to go with Bobo on this one. So if Metcalf plays, then obviously there's like a massive difference for the offense against the Rams defense that like I thought the Vikings got a little bit too drunk on the idea of like running the football last week. And maybe that was because I had Aaron Jones under 15 or 16 and a half rushing attempts, and I was annoyed every time they handed it to Aaron Jones. But it also didn't really work, right? I think he had like 58 yards or something like that on like 18 or 19 carries. And so obviously the difference for me here is whether DK plays, whether that Kenneth Walker can run the football against the Rams defense. I think they have a chance to do both of those things. Like it seemed like it was just going to be 1 week for DK, but like again, Wednesday morning, as we talk about it, it's a pretty massive difference, right? Because if he doesn't play, then I don't think the value that exists right now on the Seahawks as being home underdogs against the Rams, who again have really just played one good game because they have all of their players. So we don't know, right? Like, are the Rams all of a sudden a NFC contender, NFC West division, contender? Like,
Yeah.
I literally do not know the answer to that, right? And so I don't know that we're going to find that out unless DK plays, unless the Rams can go into Seattle and get that win. But again, like I have this as Seattle being a 1.5 point favorite based off of the ratings from last week. So to get there, obviously you have to decide how far up are you going to boost the Rams? Well, if you boost them up any further, and I shouldn't say any further, but significantly further, you're getting to the edge, the top end of the range that we prescribed for them. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's possible that the Rams are just better than that, and they actually end up being the sort of like high 50s type team. But like that wasn't really the case last season when all of these guys were healthy. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really there. I'm not ready to do it this season either, unless this line is built on the idea that DK does not play, and therefore the Seahawks are getting downgraded and the Rams aren't getting upgraded or only getting modestly upgraded.
All that totally makes sense. And that's what we like to break down here, what the lines are trying to tell you, and to pay attention as the line might move as we get more injury news heading into kickoff. I'm on the Rams here. And again, we'll see how the line moves. We keep it moving here with the Patriots at the Titans. Titans at home laying 3.5 points. This is one of those games where I'm like, should the Titans really be at home and favored by 3.5 points against anybody? But again, I said the theme for me here, a lot of teams being favored by a lot more than I think they should be. And so I'm going to take the points and need to be talked out of it. And definitely with the Patriots, that's one of these teams here. Because is there something that I'm missing here? I mean, laying more than a field goal with Tennessee seems like a lot. Or am I just blinded by, hey, the Patriots are able to come back and win against the Jets, who clearly we don't really like.
Yeah.
But it's 3.5 points with two not so good teams. I'm going to lean taking the points.
Yeah. And I'm fine with that. I mean, listen, you can absolutely skip this game on Sunday if you want to, right? Like there's 8 games at 1:00. Like this does not need to be in your rotation. That being said, like Patriots plus 3.5, like based on the ratings from last week, like I would have this game lined at 3. Tennessee was literally 12-point underdogs last week. So like, it's not like they were highly rated last week, and there's no real sort of savior coming down the pipe here for them to get, be considered any better. There's a possibility that, I don't know, I guess because of early decent play this season, we don't have the Titans rated in the same area that we would have I mean, the Panthers until the last couple of weeks where they've just been like literally kicked off the face of the earth from a rating perspective. But like the bad teams, right? Like the Titans are a bad team. You don't lose multiple games in a row by as many points as they have without being a really bad team. And so the fact that they're kind of clinging to this, like even the 30s seems still a little high for this outfit who like is just bad at this point. So it's like, okay, I think you just have two really bad teams. I would prefer Drake May start in this game for the Patriots, right? Like, again, somewhat similar to the DK situation where it's like, I would prefer to know who the quarterback is going to be. But if you told me, all right, man, you can just take plus 3.5 and it's going to be Jacoby Brissett, or it might be Jacoby Brissett, I think I'd still take that. I would still lock in that plus 3.5 and then hope later on in the week that like, oh, Drake May is going to play and the Patriots offense is going to have some sort of virility to it, right? Because right now the Titans, like they hung in there for a little bit against the Lions last week, but they're not a 60-minute football team either, right? And so when you've got two teams that, you know, are going to give you maybe 2.5 decent quarters or decent efforts, I'm with you, man. It's pretty simple. Like I'm just going to take the points.
Yeah, no, pretty simple here. We're on the points here, and we move to
Go.
the Commanders minus 3.5 at the New York Football Giants. I feel like I'm on a lot of dogs here. The Giants are home dogs here, and this is a tough one because Washington, these guys played earlier this season, obviously, and it was a close game, but Washington has clearly improved since then. I don't know. Am I just blinded by last week's performance by Washington, which wasn't their best by any stretch, right? And the Giants just seem to continue to be the Giants, to where I'm taking them as underdogs, and they keep not covering, but they're so close, and they're right there. And it's like, right. If Daniel Jones could just do blank, they'd cover this spread.
Yeah.
Am I here again right now already switching a pick before I even let you speak?
That's right. Should I step out for a sec? No.
This is a weird one.
Yeah, I like the Giants in this game too. Fun sentence.
Right?
Right?
Their defense is good. They're like
their defense is good. Their defense is good. Yeah. Okay. I'll put it this way. I can't really shake week 2 in liking the Giants in this game because as much as the Commanders have played well since then, I was on the Commanders in that game. I thought the Giants were better. I thought the Giants were the better team in that game. And so we're taking, I think it was like a 2-point spread in Washington, right? And if you take that 2-point spread in Washington, you move that game to New York, well, it should be a 2-point favorite for the Giants, right? So we're getting 3.5 points when in theory we could have been just 6 weeks ago, laying 2. Yeah. All right. I like that conceptually from the Giants. Now you could say, listen, Matt, you just talked last week about how Andrew Thomas is out and this offense is in big trouble. And I kind of liked how they held up just well enough against the Steelers. Like the problem was the Steelers caught, obviously a couple of decent long passes from Russell Wilson. And, obviously Jaden Daniels can do that same thing. But again, if you rebuild your offensive line from last year, maybe there's a possibility that losing the left tackle, the whole thing doesn't fall apart. Now, maybe it does for a week like it did against the Eagles where they gave up 8 sacks. And maybe it does when you're trying to drive for the tying score, the game-winning score, when you don't put a second person on TJ Watt, which seems like a really ill-fated decision. But I think I heard or I read or whatever, that it was only like one of 4 times all game where they didn't have TJ Watt doubled. It's like, okay, that's all. We're at least doing something here. Yeah. I am a little bit concerned because the Commanders' defense has gotten so much better and their defensive line had Caleb Williams scrambling for his life. But when you watch Caleb Williams, I kind of think he likes scrambling for his life. I watched him in college for 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, 3 years, I guess. And it's like that guy really likes to scramble. There was a couple of quarterback draws called on that last drive where they actually scored the touchdown. And I'm like, you think Caleb Williams is NFL athletic Like, do you think he's Jaden Daniels athletic? He's not. He's college football athletic for a quarterback. He's not. It's not going to work in the NFL. Daniel Jones will stay in the pocket for a little bit longer, and he will have more poise than Caleb Williams did last week. So I like that a little bit. They got a couple of running backs now that seem to, have some gumption to them, and I think you can take advantage of that. So all of this is very like a tepid endorsement of Giants, plus 3.5 here. In a weird way, I kind of prefer if this is just plus 3, because the 3.5 seems like we're being coaxed in to like, oh, come on in, you're getting the hook. You're gonna like plus 3.5, and it's like you're like, yeah, I kind of do. Like, yeah, I will walk into this haunted house. Like, it does seem like it's a good deal on the open market. What? There's been multiple murders here before? Like, I don't know. There's 3 bathrooms and they all seem really nice. Like, there's a little bit of a blood stain over there, but like we can renovate it so that it doesn't look that bad. And like that's kind of how I feel about like this Giants game, where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna come in. I'm like, I might make an offer. Yeah. On this haunted house, but it's probably not going to end that great.
Right there with you, man. Trick or treat, right? Trick or treat.
Yeah.
Trick or treating.
The Shining.
The Giants at plus 3.5 for sure. Keeping it going to the Saints, who are. I'm staring at this and hoping I made a mistake here, but it says Saints are 7-point road favorites.
Sure.
Against the Panthers. And by default, it almost didn't matter what the team was, but the Saints is 7-point road favorites. I cannot do. Like, I'm going to be on the Panthers, and I get that the Panthers suck. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I get it. But I cannot watch the Saints and then be like, yeah, I'm going to lay 7 points with them on the road. Can't do it. Give me the Panthers plus the 7. Whether it's Andy Dalton, whether it's is he okay from the accident yet?
I think we're just riding Bryce Young to the end of the road.
Riding Bryce Young,
Thelma and Louise. Yeah,
whoever it is, Tepper, their owner, could be coming down to play quarterback. It's plus 7 and the Saints, and this is not me saying that the Saints can't win by 7. That's not what I'm saying.
Everybody wins by 7 or more against the Panthers.
Yeah. Like I understand. Totally. I'm just saying by principle, I cannot take the Saints on the road laying 7 points. So that's me saying, don't bet on this game. You're sick.
Yeah. Leave this game alone too. This is a 1:00 game too. Oh God, we've already got 2 that we don't want anything to do with. Yeah, you're right. Like it's Tom Brady, and Kevin Burkhardt in for Saints Panthers on a Sunday afternoon at 4:25. Hell yeah. Listen, okay, well, let's start with the number, right? Like here, I got a book here. You just pick a page out of this book, and then whatever 24. Number, that's the point spread. That's essentially what this is. Like, this is a made-up point spread that is just like whatever, like ratings bedamned. Like, and that was the case last week too, right? Because we talked about the idea that the Panthers, we have this rating system, 0 to 100, right? If you ever go over 80, you are an historically awesome team. You are being rated like you're historically awesome. We should probably be betting against you, because that means you're minus 14 against like a good team, and we should probably just take the points. If you get below 20, you are being rated as an historically awful team, and we should probably just bet on you, because your opponent is probably mediocre if they are laying 7 points at your stadium. Here comes the New Orleans Saints. It was the same case as the Broncos though last week, right?
True.
So the Broncos got mega upgraded off of beating the Saints, by the way, and then we're just like 12-point favorites, like at home. And the thing is, like that line was quite literally built. Like I said, like, oh, they're making up a line, because they're making up a line that is quite literally built to have the bar so low that the Panthers actually cover a game.
Yeah.
And so that the sportsbook can just take the money that was bet against the Panthers for just like one time all season long, right? Because we're not the only ones conceptually betting on the Panthers here, right? The sportsbooks are as well, because all of the money comes in against the Panthers. So every week, and that's what we talked about their rating, right? The rating drops, the point spread gets out of hand, and that's where we are with Saints minus 7. Falcons were what? 5. The Bengals were like 4, the Chargers were like 4, and the Saints are 7. Because the Panthers every week just don't get it done. They fall below an incredibly low bar that right now, if we put the Saints back up to like 45, because Derek Carr is coming back, 45 is a reasonable number.
Okay.
The Panthers are, and we had the Panthers at 15. 15, like you're right, we're supposed to bet the Panthers, but I feel like we should have this baton, right, this principal baton, where like every week somebody else just takes the baton and it's going to be like, I'm going to be the guy to bet the Panthers on principle, and then that guy loses and he goes like, that sucked, like, here, you take the baton, right? So like last week I was the baton guy, and then I was like, Shell, you take the baton this week, you bet on the Panthers. Somebody has to. Like, eventually we're going to get a winner here, because the rating is going to be so far gone that, it doesn't make any sense. But in actual universe reality here, the Saints just have to win this game by 8 points to cover.
Is it wrong that
all they have
said
to
Derek
do?
Carr is back, and I'm like,
Ooh.
This is where we're at.
Don't mind if I do.
Hold on. In actual reality, Derek Carr is going to be the factor that is going to make me change this pick and take the Saints at -7 on the road. I can't believe this is a thing that's happening right now. Derek Carr.
If these two teams were on a bye and there was 7 games at 1 o'clock on Sunday, would you even notice? Of course not.
I mean, I can't believe I just wrote
treat it as a bye.
Saints -7. Saints -7. I can't believe it. Derek Carr was a deciding factor here. That's just the level of what we're talking about with these two teams here. The fact that it is not Spencer Rattler and not Heener, right? That it's Derek Carr, which still might not even be that big of an upgrade over Jake. No, I'm not going to diss Derek Carr that much. But my point being that he might at least be able to complete some passes here, run an offense here, get in field goal range here, like do something. Wow.
And the conceptual energy brought by the return of the starting quarterback, okay, I get that. And if Andy Dalton was playing, I don't think it's number 7. So I don't know. Brutal game. Let's move on.
Saints -7. Yeah, let's move on. I'm tired. I can't believe I really just did that. I switched the pick to Saints. Links. Wow. Yeah, I got to stop. And now we're on to another ugly game here, as the Broncos are on the road in Baltimore. Baltimore laying 9.5 points. And I'm right. I wrote down here that I'm on the Broncos. Again, this is another big spread. And I just think it's a team that's favored by a little too much. The Broncos seem to be functional, right? And the Ravens, the thing with them is they pick and choose their spots. Now I feel like have done a very good job of being able to pick those spots with the Ravens, and said last week, 1 o'clock game against the Browns, add in Jameis, all that other fun stuff just seemed like 9 was way too much. Yeah. Now we're back again here. And what are the Broncos relative to Jameis and the Browns and the Ravens being at home though? That's interesting. It's a lot of points though. Nearly double digits. I think the Broncos are functional. 9.5.
This touched 10, and so I grabbed a little bit of Broncos plus 10. I don't hate the point spread from like a conceptual standpoint. Like it really just depends what you think the Broncos are. And the problem is they've literally not played real NFL football teams the last 2 weeks.
Correct.
So my concern about the Broncos is that their rating over the last 2 weeks is as high as it's been all season long. And it's built off of kind of nothing, right? Like not playing that short week game against the Saints, preseason roster, and playing against the Panthers, all regular season, all the time preseason roster. Like it doesn't warrant for me, whatever the result is, like it doesn't matter because you're not playing a real team. It doesn't matter if they score 28 points or Bo Nix is 4 touchdowns or whatever. None of that makes a difference because you're not playing real teams. We're not getting real data points. But the Broncos rating has moved as if we were getting at least somewhat real data points. Now, on the sort of positive side for the Broncos is that we kind of thought their ratings should have moved from when they were playing real teams, right? Because they're 5-2 right now, and they played the Jets and the Bucs, and they've won those games. And the loss, to the Chargers kind of sucks because it was also amidst a win against the Raiders, and it's like Raiders, Panthers, Saints. Like, what am I supposed to make of this team? I don't love taking on the Ravens after they come off of a loss. I don't love that, right? Yeah. So that's not great either. So I took the +10. I realize that this line at 9, I think is pretty fair. If it went, there's some 9.5. So obviously you have 9.5 up there. 9's a dead number. It's not going to make a difference, or probably isn't going to make a difference. I don't think this line is going to go to 8.5 because that opens the door for what?
Teaser.
6-point teaser, right? So like it's probably just going to stay there no matter how much Broncos money comes in. I don't know that there's even going to be that much Broncos money coming in on this game. So I think the line is actually pretty fair at this point. It's just like, what version of the Ravens are you going to get? And the scary thing is, like, I think you probably get a pretty good version of the Ravens. And you're talking about Bo Nix on the road against the Ravens defense that's going to be a lot more difficult than Panthers at home and Saints preseason roster and the Raiders existence, right? So you're switching it.
The pick is switch here, and it's a bounce back. It's a bounce back from the Ravens. They're not going to handle that loss well, and you mentioned it. It's just a step up in weight class, and I think the lines are more reflecting the weight classes as we move into week 9. That's why I'm seeing such big spreads. So it's just a matter of who do you believe and who do you not believe. I believed in the Ravens weight class. I do not believe in the I believe in the Broncos weight class. It's just not the Ravens.
Yeah, that's right. I love the Broncos in similar weight class. Yeah, if they're playing middleweights all season long, like I'm into that, right? Yeah. I have a bet for you, like we talked about it before the season started. I literally, my sort of weirdest or like off the radar, like derivative futures bet is Broncos to finish exactly second in the AFC West. Because it was like, I want to be buying on the Broncos. I don't think they can get to the Chiefs. I do think that they can be better than the Chargers. Now, the Chargers are winning games as well, which is a little bit annoying because I think
it's going to be close.
It's going to be close, but we was getting like some outrageous price. Forget what it was. I have to look it up. But the point is like, I want to be with the Broncos in that sort of middle of the NFL, those matchups. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm on the Broncos +10 in this game. I'm probably coming back on the Ravens -9. The way that we've seen some of these teams be bet down, I wouldn't be that shocked if we saw 8.5s on the weekend, because we saw that with the Chiefs and the Raiders, and it seemed like, why would people be interested? Why would you just let people tease the Chiefs at -8.5? Yeah. And like, I don't know why, but like I did it and they won, so like that was sweet. And like, if that happens again here, I'd be down with that too. I might even just take the -3 at this point. No, I'm going to wait and see. And I think there might be some -8.5s pop up, at which point it's going to be Teaser Town USA for your boy.
Yeah, pick switch, Baltimore, let's roll, blowout city. Another game going to need to be talked into switcherooing here. You got the Jags on the road in Philadelphia taking on the Eagles. Again, they're giving you the hook. Eagles 7.5 here, and it's tough. That's where it's getting me here, and the hook has me leaning on the Jags, which is not a place I want to be at all. But the thing here with the Eagles is they've been running the ball the last few weeks. They're healthier the last 2 weeks on offense, and they look really good. Just not good enough for me to want to lay 7.5 points, like more than a touchdown. That's a tough one for me here. That's a very tough one here. What's the rating saying here?
Well, so this point spread based off of, again, like last week's ratings, or even if you started kind of messing around with it a little bit, we never get to 7.5 in this game. Never, ever get to 7.5. Okay. Right. Because the Eagles were right around 55, which I think you think, okay, that makes sense from where the Eagles were last week. So what do we do with the Eagles after they win pretty convincingly against Cincinnati, right? Like, how much do you bump them up? So I go, okay, like, let's go to 60 and see what happens. What do we got to do to get the Jags? If we go Eagles 60, which I think is fair, and I don't think it's certainly not going too far up, I don't think. But it's definitely not too short. I'm still at Eagles -6 in this game.
Yeah.
But so I go, all right, let me bet Jacksonville plus 7.5 because I don't understand this number. Then the news breaks. The Jags literally trade to the Vikings and their aforementioned injured left tackle, Christian Darrisaw. The Jags trade their left tackle, franchise, tagged left tackle Cam Robinson to the Vikings. So we talk about like good organizations, right? Like bad move to run that play and get your left tackle hurt. Again, 1 in a million shot, admittedly, but like don't F around. And they go, all right, let's pick a team that has a decent left tackle and is out of the running here. Boom, Jaguars. We got you. And so you go, okay, now I'm going to mess with this Eagles team when the Jags not just traded their franchise tagged offensive tackle, they've also just lost another game. And that signal in trading that tackle to the rest of the organization is not great. Then you go, okay, we got a couple of receivers that are banged up, right? Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk left the game last week. You go, all right, what's left for the Jags? The answer's not really all that much, right? Protection is potentially going to be bad for Trevor Lawrence. He's prone to turnovers. We know that. Who's he going to throw to? Who's going to run the ball? And the Eagles are vibing right now. And when the Eagles are vibing, it can look a lot better than it actually is when they're playing a team of their ilk, right? Because the Eagles are bullies.
Yeah.
Nick Sirianni wants to be a bully. He wants to go for it on 4th down against the Falcons to instead of just running the ball a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so I look at it and I go, man, I got to get out of this bet. Like maybe somebody will take plus 7.5, and so that the Eagles can be -7, and I can just get out of this bet, have myself maybe the world's tiniest like push middle situation. So that's what I'm waiting for right now, because I get liking the Jags. I literally bet the Jags. I then found out that they've basically given up on the season and sent a clear message to the team that they've given up on the season, and that they've compromised their on-field product by trading away their best offensive lineman. Not great.
Not great. Not great at all. It's a tough one. It's a very tough one. The 7.5, I'm going to stay there. Here's a problem. Here's the biggest problem. Here's the biggest problem. The next game is the Raiders and Bengals.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Raiders, and I see myself switching off the Raiders. So now if I'm switching off of all of these things, and I know none of these things are linked. None of these things are supposed to be linked.
You're right.
Right?
Nope. Yep.
But it's just like, ugh. Do you know what? Shoot. We're switching the Eagles.
Okay.
Eagles, it's being switched. I am on the Philadelphia Football Eagles -7.5. That is the pick. The pick is being switched. The Jags can be shipped to the moon because they are not a good football team, and they haven't been a good football team. And their team is telling you that they are not a good football team by trading away players, and you're injured, and you haven't done anything, and you should be in London anyways. Eagles and Sirianni, don't mess this up for me, Sirianni.
You should just
don't mess this up for me, Sirianni. Let's move on here. Pick switched, Eagles -7.5. We keep it going to the aforementioned Raiders at the Cincinnati Bengals. And when I say here that the Cincinnati Bengals are favored by 7 points, that sounds like a lot,
isn't it?
7.5. What? Okay.
Hold on. Okay. Yeah, no, 7. You're right. It was 7. You're right.
Okay.
That one's on me. No, there's some 7.5s. There's some 7.5s.
Well. I mean, I'll take the extra half point here. We'll see.
7.5 -115 at a place.
Should the Bengals be favored by 7 points against anybody? I feel like it might be a repeat of what you might have just said, in which they have some bully in them too, in which they might be beating up a crap team, or maybe this is just their quote unquote season from hell, where they're just not that good, and we're just now finding out. And the reason I'm saying all this about the Raiders is because the Raiders epic backdoor cover last week against the Chiefs, right? And sitting there betting on the Raiders. I wasn't even on my Chiefs last week, but betting on the Raiders, the backdoor cover, it was left wide open. and it was a thing of beauty, we'll say, from the backdoor cover. So is it going to the well too many times in a row that I'm not saying that I think the Raiders can win this game.
Right.
It's just keep it close, keep it stinky. And, Bengals defense doesn't really do much to stop anybody. So the Raiders qualify as anybody.
Yeah, that was the disappointing thing for me last week with the Bengals, right? Where it's like, okay, you got your guys back, and this is a big game. This is not just a big game for like the standings, which obviously like every game in theory is equal from a standings perspective. Not really true when it's a divisional game. Last week's game, not a divisional game, but it was like, all right, this is a good team. You can show yourself here. Now you can tell me T. Higgins was out and the whole idea of the Bengals kind of falls apart, if you will, when T. Higgins misses a game and they don't have all of the guys that they think that they, need to have success with. But I look at it like this way and I go, okay, well, the difference between the Chiefs and the, that Chiefs Raiders game and this Bengals Raiders game is one significant fundamental issue. The Chiefs are good. The Bengals are not good. And so when we look at these spreads that all kind of seem to blend together, where you've got an 8.5 here, a 9.5 here, 7.5 here, it's like, well, yeah, you got, would you rather have the Ravens laying a bunch of points? Would you rather have the Eagles laying a bunch of the points? Or would you rather have the Bengals laying a bunch of points? Like,
great point.
When did the Bengals earn this right? Because, we always rely on sort of the mathematical sort of, numerical sort of valuation of these teams. Let's say the Raiders are what the Raiders are, right? Which is like, they're not as bad as the Patriots, as bad as the Titans, as bad as the Panthers, but they're like a pretty bad team. Like, I think their rating just kind of stays the same in sort of just as a bad team. Bengals, like, I don't know what the Bengals are, but I know they're not a good team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, we can get to 7 here. We can get to 7.5, but that assumes that the Bengals are like a 56 out of 100. And when you start talking about other teams that are rated that way or sort of deserve to be rated that way, Commanders, maybe the Rams this week, like, I just have more faith in those two teams than I do the Bengals at this point, because for all of like Joe Burrow's existence and Jamar Chase's existence, they don't actually win any of the games.
Yeah.
And so it's like, they would be delighted to win an NFL football game this week, but we're going to ask them to do so by 8 points. Like, I'm not there yet. And so for the Raiders, it's like, all right, there's obviously tumult and chaos and it's just Raider constant nonsense, et cetera, et cetera. But like, they have played a little bit better on the road. And once you get past, like, Devontae Adams is not walking through that door and all of that sort of stuff, and everybody kind of finds their roles a little bit. And even though it's not like big name guys, you still have Gardner Minshew who can throw you in or out of a game. And so, like, this might be a good Gardner Minshew game. Why? Because the Bengals defense allows for some of these quarterbacks to have great games, right? Jaden Daniels' best game was against the Bengals, right? Jacoby Brissett's best game was against the Bengals. Jalen Hurts' best game is against the Bengals. Like, how far do we have to go here to sort of realize that this Bengals team is probably not any good? And having lost that game last week, again, where is their mindset? And by the way, Thursday nighter next week. Do you know it? Do you know the Thursday nighter next week?
I don't.
Your Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. So if there was a universe in which the Bengals were going to circle a game on their calendar that would even give them a hope, like Joe Burrow spoke this week about, like, usually it takes 10 wins to get into the playoffs. Like, we got to go 7-2 to finish. Like, that's doable. And it's like, all right, man, but like, you're giving yourself 7 wins in the next 9 games. That doesn't tell me that you're taking this one game at a time. This tells me that you're like, well, we still have the Ravens and we could beat them because we were up 10 points on them. You blew that game. So I just look at this going like, this feels like an overlook potential because this Bengals team is unserious. They are potentially not very well coached, but I could say that about literally every team, including the Raiders. But I'm not asking the Raiders to win by 8 points here. I'm asking the Bengals to win by 8 points. And to that, I will say no. I don't think the Bengals are going to win by 8 points in this game. So, again, if I have to bet this game, I'm taking the Raiders plus 7.5. And honestly, I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Raiders won this game outright.
So that was my last question there, and you just answered it for me.
Yep.
I can buy the half point, which I will buy said half point, and I will take
it's 5
the
cents.
Raiders.
It's minus 115. And so, I mean, you're not even really buying.
Yeah.
People get uppity about like buying points, half points. Like, oh God. And it's like, you're not really buying. You're shopping around. You're getting minus 115, a minus 115 price, which isn't crazy.
Yeah, I'm just doing that for the bean counters at home.
I know. I'm doing it for the sharp community.
Yeah,
they will lose their mind if you are buying points.
What? How is your record? Blah blah blah. And it's like, no, it's just
it's out there. I'll say the sportsbook out loud if you want me to, but I'm not gonna.
Listen, it's on the record. 7.5. There we go. Sunday Night Football has the Colts at the Vikings. Joe Flacco is in for the Colts, as they can't tell me that they're not benching Anthony Richardson for subbing out of the game. They could say whatever they want. I know
totally.
that he wasn't that good. He wasn't that good, and I get it.
Totally.
But that definitely was just not a good look, admitting that you were just tired and
the worst
out of the game.
Yep.
The absolute worst.
Yep.
So here we are, Vikings favored by 5 points. And my radar goes off. Vegas zone. Joe Flacco getting points. That's where my initial lean is going to be, taking the points with Joe Flacco. But my question is on the Vikings. Were they just in a tough spot versus the Rams? Were they just beaten up by the Lions, who are beating up seemingly everybody in the league? And now are they, am I just like undervaluing them right now? And this is just weight classes and they should just steamroll these guys? And by steamroll, I mean win by a touchdown.
Sure.
That is my question to you, because my initial lean is Flacco and the points in the Vegas zone.
Okay, so you want to talk Vikings first? I think, like if last week our whole handicap for that game is that the Vikings are going to play to the bottom side of their range because of it being a short week and who they had just played, the Lions. By the way, more reason to not like the Titans this week.
Correct.
Right? They just played the Lions. So Patriots, Patriots money line. So if we talk about the Vikings last week because of the situation, and we downgrade them for that singular game, we have to put them right back to where they were before that game, right? Where like on that sort of like neutral, like, all right, it's not a crazy like schedule spot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They also get extra time to prepare for the game, which we like. They address the need at left tackle. And listen, left tackle isn't some like uber complicated position where it's like, so how do you guys play left tackle? It's like, well, you block. You block their best rusher is essentially how we do it, same way everybody else does it. So I'm not as fazed by the Christian Darrisaw injury as I was, because they went and they did the best that they could to address it. Is Cam Robinson as good as Christian Darrisaw? No, but like at least it's somebody. It's better than their backup, the guy who was going to play. So I'm not going to downgrade the Vikings, honestly, really at all. And so if I see that the Vikings, or I feel like the Vikings are being downgraded, I'm probably going to like the Vikings. So that's just the Vikings. It's before we even talk about their opponent. The Colts. The Colts have been this fascinating thing where I talked about it to start the show with the Texans handicap in the Thursday night game, where I'm like, I don't really understand what the Colts rating is. Like, why is their rating going up in this going into the game against the Texans? Because like Anthony Richardson's playing. And I've only really liked the Colts when Joe Flacco was potentially going to play. But there was also an element of Joe Flacco playing that was a surprise, right? Against the Jags. Oh, we don't know if it's going to be Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson. We have to prepare for both. That's really tricky, right? Same thing with the Steelers. He comes in against the Steelers. And the Steelers like, we've been practicing for Anthony Richardson all week. We got a guy in Justin Fields who plays a lot like Anthony Richardson. We don't have anybody who plays like Joe Flacco does. The Vikings, and this is where the sort of announcement of him getting benched so early on in the week is, I feel like, more like, as you said, like a punishment, where it's like, we can't just have this linger all week with our ridiculous quarterback saying that he's tuckered out, and that's why he has to come out of the game. Because that was just like, I said on my show on Tuesday, I was like, that's just not how this works, man. You don't just get to leave when you're tired. right?
No.
And the offensive line doesn't just to get to tap their head and the guard gets to come out for a play. Those guys are playing 100% of the snaps. And like the next play was a handoff anyway. So like you probably could have caught your wind when you handed the ball off to Jonathan Taylor. Like, no. So like we know this, like he's lost the room at that point, right? And so if I think you've lost the room, then yeah, you got to go. And so Joe Flacco comes in. And so the idea is that, oh, we like it when Joe Flacco plays. Like we like Joe Flacco. Problem is, we like Joe Flacco when the Colts are being priced like Anthony Richardson is going to play, which is to say not very well, right? Like we had them mid-30s, high 30s, maybe early 40s, and then it was like, oh yeah, Joe Flacco's going to play, and the line wouldn't change. And so it would be like, we're getting a better quarterback and the same price. Right now, this Colts rating, even if we knock the Vikings down a touch, which I don't want to do, even if we do that, the Colts line right now with Joe Flacco playing, I should say their rating right now with Joe Flacco playing, is above average. 51, 52, maybe some 53, depending again how you're moving, if you're moving the Vikings at all. Like, no, like, I don't think so. And so you go, okay, well, Joe Flacco is if he's like a superhero. It's like he's a superhero on a team that's a 35. He's not a superhero on a team that's being called like a 52. And I just look back and I go, what happened in the playoffs last year? Right? Joe Flacco started for the Browns. They went to the Texans, and all he did was throw interceptions for the entire game. Because the Texans' defense is good, the defense gets pressure, and the defense can confuse. Well, those are all things that the Vikings, I think, are going to do to this version of Joe Flacco because they know that all they have to do is deal with a statue back there, and they don't have to waste any time on Anthony Richardson. And even if they did think Anthony Richardson is going to play, he's not doing enough in the ground game anyway to really be all that concerning. So I just look at this and going like, wow, you're going to give, and this line was 7 in the look ahead, right? It was 6.5 on Sunday night on the open, and we are down to 5. And so whether that's going up with the Colts or going down with the Vikings, I disagree with both of those things. So I think Sunday night comes out and the Vikings win comfortably against the Colts team that, like, again, when you're playing the Steelers, and again, I understand the Steelers record, but, you know, whatever. And some of these other teams, Jaguars, right? Like Texans, who, again, I don't think the Texans are as good as the Vikings because, I don't know, we saw them play each other. Like, yeah, man, I think this is a real tough spot here for Joe Flacco, and the price is just absolutely ridiculous on the Colts, or their rating, their valuation is ridiculous. And yeah, this is Vikings for me.
Yeah, pick has been switched, Minnesota Vikings, and I'm gonna just put the weight class stamp on this one here. Yeah. That this is just a difference in weight class, and Minnesota Vikings -5. I really like that one. I like that one. It's like that was a perfect example of how we talked that one through. It's like I'm there. I'm like, I know this is what would normally happen here with Flacco, Vegas own, but
yeah, took you to the Sunday nighter to like one, so we got something.
That's not true. I switched them.
I know, I'm kidding. I just like that you're like, I liked that one. You're like, well, we've been doing this for 2 hours or hour and a half. No, makes right. You see my point. You see where it's going with that.
We move on to Monday Night Football, and Monday Night Football has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Kansas City taking on the Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 9 points. That is a lot of points. It's been a long time since you've seen me lay a lot of points with the Chiefs. But
he's doing that. Wow.
It's a lot of points. I know that, I've been hesitant to take a lot of points during this pod. And so it's funny that, the Chiefs would be the team that I'm like, oh no, I'll lay the 9 points. But if there is a person that I'm saying, waiting to see when is the real Patrick Mahomes going to show up, not this guy that keeps throwing picks every week and this guy that can't throw touchdowns all of a sudden. Yeah. When is that guy going to show up? It might be in this game. Now, the Bucs defense is good, but I feel like as we get Hopkins up to speed, and not that Hopkins, this is going to be fun because I'm making up a word here. I feel like Hopkins might be washed, but if there's a place where your washedness could be eliminated some, because the coaching will figure out how to put you in the best spots. That would be with Andy Reid and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And of course with your man's Patrick Mahomes. So here we are. Meanwhile, the Bucs, I think, are hanging on here. They're hanging on. Still going to be functional, but it's not going to go well for them this week. Chiefs roll. Monday Night Football. Primetime spot. Fired up. Ready to go. Chiefs roll.
No.
This is the perfect place to end this pod. So
I know. I was just like, no, that's not what we're doing here. No, this is Chiefs laying more than a touchdown. Like,
correct.
No, like we just they might win. They might win by a lot. Like, okay, all of that is conceptually possible, but it's not profitable like long term. We just saw it last week, right? Where I said to you, I was like, yeah, like it's the Raiders, so I get why the Chiefs are even -10, and you just sort of have to cross your arms and like just wait to watch the Chiefs not cover, right? Like that's there was no handicap for the game. It was just like I just know that it's going to happen, and Gardner Minshew backdoor and all of that sort of thing. Replace Gardner Minshew with Baker Mayfield, and you've got the handicap for the game, right? Like Chiefs probably again like couple of field goals and maybe you thought they'd get a touchdown or two. Maybe there's a 20-7 lead, a 23-10 lead, 5 minutes to go, right? They have to punt because there's a holding penalty or their left tackle keeps jumping off, false starting. And then all of a sudden Baker Mayfield's got the ball back. You mentioned the Buccaneers defense, right? And like you watched the game and it seemed like the Falcons were just going up and down the field because there was 4 touchdowns from your guy Kirk Cousins, right? And then you go and you break open the old stat machine here and you go like, well, 394 total yards is not great, but it's also not as bad as I necessarily thought it was going to be. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers, without those 2 top wide receivers, had 432 yards, right? So like they still got the ball down the field, and you have, when you're having to sort of supplant those guys, Godwin and Evans, with young guys or guys who don't get a lot of run, right? Sterling Shepard, things of that nature. Obviously, Jalen McMillan being the youngest guy. Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, right? And like, oh yeah, guess what? You guys are just playing now 6 days later. And like a lot of snaps. Like that's going to be tricky, right? But they still managed 400 yards despite said trickiness. So I don't hate the Buccaneers offense just because, and the thing we don't like about the Buccaneers, right, is those 2 wide receivers being out. But I don't have them downgraded that much from a offensive standpoint because there was no indication that I really should. Now you get yourself another extra week, even an extra day, because this is a Monday Night Football game. You've played a real NFL football game if you're Raheem Jarrett and Jalen McMillan getting the most snaps. I believe he had the most snaps that he's had all season long. Mm-hmm. And offensive line is healthy. Tristan Wirfs is good. Luke Goedeke is good to go. Like all those guys are fine. I don't really have any problem with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense relative to where they were with Godwin and Evans. And then you mentioned the defense, right? Again, those touchdown passes, not ideal, but from a purely yardage standpoint, it wasn't a disaster. They have all of their guys, like Levante David might be a little bit questionable. A nickelback by the name of Tyke Smith, who I don't know all of that well, I must admit. Like, he might be questionable, but we're not missing Vita Vea or Kalijah Kancey or any of these guys. So I think this Buccaneers team that has been downgraded because of those injuries and the fact that they lost to the Falcons, who, we might be, a little bit higher than the market on. I don't know why the Buccaneers rating that puts them 9-point underdogs is down to 41. That's not where they were when they were 3.5-point underdogs at home to the Ravens 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Right? They were they were considered above average team. This is not the rating that they had when they beat the Lions in Detroit. Right? Like all that's changed is Evans and Godwin being out, but it hasn't really affected the offense. They have more running backs than they've ever had before. It's just, you can't even, turn your head and you're running into another Buccaneer guy who's just running. Which one is that guy again? And it's, you know what I mean? Like the offense is fine. And by the way, last week, that game against the Raiders, like, yes, it was a 2-touchdown game that needed to get a backdoor in the end. But I got to be honest with you, if you're a Chiefs fan, didn't you feel like that game was a little too close against a Raiders team that you obviously handled pretty easily in the past, other than that weird, wacky Christmas Day game. Like, this is still a Chiefs offense that, like you mentioned, right? It's kind of just the land of the lost here, or the wash. Like, imagine Travis Kelce on a different team.
Oh,
You mentioned Hopkins, right? But imagine Travis Kelce on, like, just literally any other, maybe not any other team. He'd probably be pretty good on the Ravens, but like on a standard team, I mean, he would have retired by now, right? So I just look at it and I'm like, all right, how many points are the Chiefs going to score against the Buccaneers here? I don't have them getting to 30. So I think it's like a 24. And I think, like, I don't really have any problem thinking the Buccaneers can get to 17, 16, something like that. And by the way, like, we're 1 or 2 turnovers, which Patrick Mahomes has been kind of prone to and was again against the Raiders. You're 1 or 2 turnovers away from this game flipping and the Buccaneers having a chance to win this game outright. Because you know what? Like, it would be a little weird if the Chiefs lost their first game against the Buccaneers, but it wouldn't be crazy.
No.
It wouldn't be nuts.
No.
So I kind of like the Bucs a little bit to maybe win this game outright.
Woo! Spicy way to close out our week 9 picks for sure. Yeah, I'm just back in the saddle riding the Chiefs. Surprised to nobody.
Couldn't get them to switch.
I needed to get the fix. I needed to get the fix back in of being on the Chiefs. There's no Niners.
You can get the fix. You can get the fix. Chiefs up 10. Right? Punting.
Exactly. But before we get to Monday night, obviously so much ahead. Where can the people find you online, my friend, to get all of the information as we head into week 9?
Yeah, at mrutsauthentic on Twitter. It's the easiest way to get everything and get to the channels you need to get to. But substack.com/@mrutsauthentic there as well. Just go to substack.com, type in the window sports betting. Couldn't be more simple than that. But yeah, follow on Twitter if you don't necessarily know where you need to go, we'll get you there. But yeah, substack.com, the window, college football, NFL, do a little more hockey once the football stuff dies down a little bit, and we'll get into March Madness, Stanley Cup playoffs, and all that good stuff. So yeah, podcast and written word all over at substack.com.
Yes, lots going on indeed. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And of course, like and follow and subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. It's Apple, Spotify, and of course on YouTube, because I always say you should pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is a Clutch Picks betting podcast, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.